So what is a sensory processing disorder? You hear it all the time. You might see different behaviours in different people and think that's really confusing. What is all this about? Well, I'm Laure Jackson, occupational therapist, sensory health coach, and it is potentially confusing unless you understand that there are different types of sensory processing, what they look like. Yes, it may not be an actual in the diagnostic manual for being a diagnosis, but it is real. And I want to affirm that this is real, but it does look different according to how we process our senses. So let me take it back to the beginning. Okay, we start sensory processing. We come out at birth with hopefully all our senses intact, ready to get built on, ready to be more coordinated and to talk well and have great relationships and to be emotionally regulated and so on. Something in that development gets blocked. Something gets in the way of that processing. So what normally happens, we have sensations that come from the world around and from our own bodies. We normally look at 7, about 8 senses, and each of those senses can be received in the brain in different ways and be processed in different ways and be integrated in different ways. That's why we talk about sensory integration. So if you have something that you sense, let's start with that. You've got to feel, you've got to hear, you've got to see something first before you can make sense of it. So in your sight, hearing, taste, touch, sound, your body, all of those senses, your interoceptors inside your body, they have to first register the sensation. Okay, they have to know that their name has been called, or they have to hear a sound in order to pay attention to it, to think, what was that? So we start with that registration, and some people have issues and difficulties just registering that, oh, this is where my body is. Oh, somebody touched me in the skin system. So we have some registration issues. Some people can over-respond. So the registration issue, if someone touches you, they might hit out and be really aggressive with it, thinking that you only just press them gently or nicely. They were thinking that it was a real hit and they'll hit you back. Or they do that in the playground, or they do that in the workplace, and you're thinking, no, that was a complete misinterpretation. You didn't register it correctly, you didn't adapt to it, you didn't respond to it appropriate to the level of the stimulation that you were given. So you can overreact, you can underreact, and we'll go into that a little bit more. You can also then have difficulties discriminating or perceiving. So if someone says something, they might call your name, but you might not recognize the name, or your child might not recognize their name. They know something's been said, they've registered it, but they can't perceive what it was. Or they see a letter on a sheet of paper, and it's like, we know it's the letter A, but they're trying to work out what is it, because they can see something's there, they've registered it, but they don't discriminate. They can't work out what it is. They can't pick out the detail in that specific thing. Then you have those who have more sensory-based motor issues. They're the ones that are typically more clumsy, they're uncoordinated, they really don't like sports. They might be a bit clueless about even what to do about certain things. They don't have the idea of, oh, I could do something different with this toy or this game, or I could just have the idea of doing something different, whether that's a child or an adult. And that's the other thing about sensory processing. Not only are there different subtypes of sensory processing, but it affects all of us at every age. From tinies, from 2 weeks upwards, we can start giving sensory strategies if they're not feeding well. We work through those toddler years, those school-aged years, those teen years into adulthood, and then at the other end of the spectrum as well, for those who go back to the senses being the most important thing, especially if they're dealing with dementia, other areas of the brain that have been affected. And they go back to realizing how important that sensory information is to them and their well-being. So that's why I am very much a sensory health coach. It's all about sensory health. So what does it look like in real life? Okay, so we have these registration issues, which we often call modulation issues, because you've got to respond appropriately to the stimulations coming to you. So some people are really overreactive. So I was working with this young lad, we'll call him Liam. He was about 8 and absolutely hated certain sounds. So the hands were over the ears right away. So he was overreactive in his hearing system, but also in his touch system. He absolutely hated being touched. He hated his clothes being changed. He hated his hair being cut because it was like fine, the light touch around his head when his hair was cut. He was overreactive to his vestibular system. He really didn't like being moved. So he would be quite stubborn, really quite controlling in his behaviours, and the parents were just the loveliest of parents, as most parents are, and they just could not get through. They couldn't understand what was going on with him. So because of his overreactivity, he was also a really picky eater. So you've got issues all over. You've got dressing, you've got sleeping, because you didn't want to, all the issues involved, the sensory processing side of what's involved with sleeping. Eating was an issue. And then he was also quite underreactive, had difficulties discriminating, and had some sensory-based motor issues as well. So he wasn't the most integrated. He wasn't the best at sports. So you can imagine his whole self-esteem was like, there, really, really low. He felt wrong about himself. He was starting to be picked on at school. Parents were, wondering whether to home educate or not, homeschool. All of those kind of issues that come into play as to where is the best environment for my child and what kind of things can I do for him. So we joined together. They came into my sensory super system. I have them for parents, teachers, professionals, carers, anybody who's interested in learning more about sensory processing. And for this family, we helped them find their child's unique sensory thumbprint. So with all of the senses that we have, we've got to learn what bits fit for that particular individual, what particular things, what is your particular sensory thumbprint that is so unique to you, that is so unique to them. So we found this for this little one, and we found where he was overreactive, where he was underreactive, where he had difficulties discriminating, where his sensory-based motor issues were. There was an awful lot going on, and being adopted, there were more issues around trauma, attachment, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to pick out. So we're starting here. So after a year, equipping, empowering the parents through giving them exercises, through finding a flow. I don't like doing kind of like therapy that is you have to do it at a certain time in a certain way. I'm very much about making it fit with your lifestyle, whether you're an adult. And I'll just digress one moment. Yeah, I had this lovely, he was a doctor, he was a junior doctor. And he was really struggling with handling patients because his own skin system was over alert, and he didn't like being touched, and he didn't like touching others. He could do it, but it wasn't what he was choosing for best. So we had a period of time. His social skills, he said, I don't want to go out to the office parties. I don't want to go out to any of that. I don't like the social side of things. I don't want to go out drinking with them. So we found that what he really needed, and he classed the term proprioceptive connection. So we found ways that he could have social interaction with people in a meaningful way, and we really calmed his skin system down so that he wasn't so overreactive to being touched, to being close to other people. So that's working with adults. But back to Liam. So with this little chappie, after a year of just working with a family, both in a group setting and on a one-to-one basis, so they could get the support of other parents as well as that one-to-one OT for me to be able to speak into their lives and see what was happening and tweak those activities, because that's what we need to do. One size does not fit all, does it? So we have these activities, they're finding their flow, they're introducing it as an integrated part of everyday life. And 9 to 12 months later, he is eating. Like, the variety of foods that he's eating has rapidly expanded. He will sit down and sit with the family for meal times, and it's just like, yeah, a massive celebration from the family's point of view. His coordination went from only being able to catch a ball about 15% of the time to about 85-90% of the time. And so his self-esteem is growing and growing and growing. We've managed to integrate who he is. We've managed to help him feel more secure in himself. That is the ultimate aim of sensory processing and integration. And what a sensory processing issue, a disorder, a difficulty, whatever you want to call it, it gets in the way of life. And we want to help you thrive. We want to help people flourish in sensory health in all those areas.